this weapon, and know that I have chosen mine. But take heed, horseman. The universe has so many faces. Your survival depends on what you have learned here. You must open your eyes to much more than that which gazes back at you from the mirror.
Fine. Can we go now?
Darksiders 3 is an action game where you play as Fury, one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. After being summoned by the Charred Council, a group of 3 talking rocks that cause the screen to shake comically when speaking, you find out that the apocalypse is already underway. But rather than riding out as a horseman of the apocalypse, you're told that the 7 deadly sins have been released onto the earth and Fury is tasked with finding and capturing them. Now, when they say roaming the earth, what they really mean is mildly spread out within walking distance of your starting point. Which is fortunate since Fury's horse dies immediately. Which is also fortunate for the developers as it saves them the trouble of animating a horse-mounted moveset. The story here seems to really only be aiming to add some structure and context to the coming events. And it's the gameplay that's meant to be the star of the show. Since we are playing as an apocalyptic horseman being commanded by flaming rocks to fight enemies that are the embodiment of sin, there really isn't much for the average person to relate to anyway, so it's a fine approach. The gameplay itself is mainly combo-based lock-on combat combined with puzzle solving and exploration. The game world is freely explorable with more paths becoming available as you gain new abilities. Waypoints are scattered around the world to teleport between areas and double as a place to level up and shop. Early on in the game, you'll also run into Ulthane, which can upgrade your weapons and the enhancements that you attach to them.
So it stands to reason that we little Ulthane could enhance your arsenal, if your horsemanship would give me the chance.
Enhancements provide a passive and active bonus, with the passive always being in effect while the active only works when the weapon is currently equipped. It's very clear that Darksiders 3 draws heavily from the Dark Souls series. The level design being connected by waypoints and shortcuts, dropping souls on death and using them as a way to level up your attribute points, and even items are very Dark Soul-like, such as your main healing item which you can find upgrades for just like the Soul series. The combat as well is trying to feel more like Dark Souls in that Fury won't often survive 3 to 4 big hits and feels like it's meant for more of a one-on-one encounter with challenging foes. When the combat is one-on-one with a strong enemy and some space to move around in, it works well. Landing some well-timed combos while correctly dodging feels good and a lot of fun. Absolutely wrecking tough enemies feels great and gets addicting, making you want to find the next encounter. Combat with multiple enemies in the open, on the other hand, can be a bit hit or miss. And combat with multiple enemies in small areas can be a complete mess. Fighting in corridors and other tight areas really accentuate problems with the camera lock-on as well. The camera does not know what to do when it gets backed into a corner, which can happen a lot in small areas. You and your enemy have attack and dodge animations that cause huge amounts of character movement. Not only does this cause the camera and lock-on to struggle to keep up, but it also means that in a fight it's very common for enemies to end up behind you or somewhere else off screen. Having the camera back off a little or let us move it back ourselves would be very helpful. And since enemies end up off screen and have an attack animation that can cover the length of an entire room, it is very common to get hit by things off screen. With enemies jumping, flying, and warping around, lock-on can sometimes lose the enemy and drop the target. This means you have to manually try to maneuver the camera to find the enemy that just disappeared, often while still trying to watch and dodge the ones in front of you. Bosses for me were easier than the levels themselves since again the combat works best during one-on-one fights. Some bosses had a few moves that felt a little cheap, and one in particular had a poorly executed puzzle sequence, but the game gives you a lot of tools to work with, and if you take full advantage of them, everything the game throws at you is pretty manageable. It was rare for me not to beat a boss on the first encounter, and only 1 or 2 took more than a second try. If you do want to prepare yourself for a boss fight though, the only way to refill your main healing item is to grind mobs for charges, or the much easier way is to get yourself killed to instantly refill it, which is kinda strange. I did enjoy Darksiders 3 the most during exploration, puzzles, and when the combat was in open areas. These are the moments when everything is working quite well. By the middle of the story, I had hit a pretty enjoyable stride with the game. I had gotten used to the combat quirks and was having a lot of fun. Plus, I was interested to see what power-ups were coming up next, and what secrets I can find. Towards the end though, performance issues along with constant loading that pauses the game really started to wear me down. I played the game on a standard PS4, and yes, the game has to frequently stop entirely and load the upcoming area, which basically defeats the purpose of not having loading screens. I have not seen a game load in this manner since Morrowind, which was released in 2002. It is not uncommon for the game to have to stop and load several times within a single minute of actual gameplay, depending on the paths you take. Pile onto this the game's already frequent slowdown, stuttering, and artifacts. It gets a bit baffling why this game was released in this state. There were even times where I'd run into a repeating bug in a certain area that would cause all sound to stop working until I restarted the game. One particularly terrible spot was during an instant death tornado puzzle. This puzzle requires you to run away from a tornado and reach a safe area before it instantly kills you. The timing is pretty tight, but by itself it's not too bad once you figure out where to go. The problem, however, is just before you reach safety, the game has to stop and load during this escape sequence. Not only does this absolutely kill the pacing and tension of being chased, but stopping to load can toggle off your sprint. So at the last second, you're trying to figure out if you're still sprinting or not, and if you're not, trying to get your character to sprint again. Did you hit the button too many times to compensate? You'll never know since you're in a tornado now. Moments like this feel extremely unpolished, bordering on unfinished. I would like to note, however, that during production of this review, patch 1.04 was released, which has improved the technical problems and tweaked the game a bit. A few more patches like this and the game would be a solid little action title. Just in time for it to go on sale, which is when I would suggest for people to pick it up. It is fun enough to be worth playing, but wait for the patches and then get it on sale. While I did find myself enjoying the game quite a bit, there were a lot of technical problems that negatively impacted my experience. But overall, and with patch 1.04 considered, I would give Darksiders 3 a 7. And that'll do it for our review of Darksiders 3. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time. Later!